frame. I do not have a tripod at the moment, so this is... Okay, cool. We're doing it. Hi YouTube, my name is Cara and welcome to my knitting podcast. This is going to be my little corner of the internet where I share all about the things that I've been knitting and making with my hands. And yeah, let's dive into it. So I started knitting this year. Right now it is the end of July, and I started knitting I think it was in April, so in the springtime. And it's not my first time knitting. I did learn how to knit when I was pretty young from my grandmother. She used to make all of her children's clothes. She was a very talented seamstress, so she would always, make all the garments for the whole family, for my mom and her brother, because they lived a little bit more north in China, and so it did get pretty cold in the wintertime, and so she would knit everybody's sweaters and jackets and socks and mittens and things like that. So I know that when I was pretty young, maybe like 7, 8 years old, I learned how to knit from her. And I don't have any specific memories of her teaching me how to knit, but I just know that she did, and that memory is still in my body, which is just so incredible. And I'm almost 29 now, and so I haven't knit this entire time. I did for a little bit. I used to knit when I was in the 5th grade for just a little bit. It was a phase, Mom. I used to knit in class, and it was just like, basic squares. I would make scarves and like blankets for my stuffed animals and things like that. But that was it. And so for my entire adult life, I have not been a knitter until very, very recently. And now the internet is a thing, and so I discovered Ravelry, and I discovered knitting YouTube and knitting social media, and it was just so inspiring. Now I'm obsessed, and you cannot tear me away from my knitting. So yeah, I would maybe call an advanced beginner, and there's not too many videos out on YouTube. I think there's a lot of established knitters, at least where they've had 1 or 2 years of experience. And I thought about whether it would be a good idea or not to wait until I had a little bit more experience before sharing my knits online. But ultimately, I think it is my favorite stage of learning a new craft is the very beginning. I think it can be so invigorating and almost like the first stage of being in love, because every day you're learning something new about the craft, and you're kind of swooning over it, and every little experience just means so much when you're brand new to a craft. And hopefully this will be helpful for any of you who are sort of just entering the knitting world and want to see what a beginner can make. So there's 2 projects that I'm not going to talk about that were my actual first projects. Where I am going to start is my first knitting patterns that I downloaded off Ravelry and followed. So these are the very first projects that I'm reading instructions and figuring out how to do garment construction. Off camera, I've got my giant pile of knitting stuff in a dollar store bucket. So that's what I'm reaching from. Okay, first one. This is the Cecile top by Suzanne Mueller, or Paula Strikt. That is still very confusing to me, why there are 2 names, but that's the designer. And I was actually inspired to do this pattern by the yarn that I chose. I know some people start with the yarn and they look at the yarn and they think, what can I make out of this yarn? And then others find a pattern and think what yarn would be best for this pattern. So this first project was the former of those two strategies. I ordered some yarn from Purl Soho from one of their sales, and I started out with some cotton yarns because they were more affordable. I still wanted nice quality though, because I thought if I'm gonna put all this effort into making something, it should be, you know, something that's comfortable to wear and something that will last. So Purl Soho is a little bit more of a fancy, higher end yarn brand. But I picked their organic cotton yarn that was on sale, and this was the color Warm Rock. I don't know how many of you are into color theory and color analysis, but I also got sucked into that corner of the internet and went into a deep dive about what my season is, and I think I am a autumn, and I specifically think I am a soft autumn. So this was a color that really spoke to me. On camera, it's not really showing up super well. It looks very great on camera, but it is called Warm Rock, and I feel like that's such a good name for this color. It is obviously like a stony color, like a rock, but it has a really distinct warm undertone to it, like almost like a golden green undertone to it. That makes it suit my warm undertones as well. And usually I can't wear grays, but this is exactly the kind of color that actually works for me. So yeah, and I also think that this color specifically has so much elegance and sophistication to it, so I wanted to find something that was kind of sleek and minimal and that would match the vibe of this yarn. So I landed on, I was comparing a few, and I landed on this one. I just love this thick 10 by 10 ribbing. I find that looks so lovely and refined almost. And it also, for my first project, seemed it was simple enough for me to do. I learned all the basic skills off of YouTube, like, you know, right and left leaning increases and things like that. And overall, this was a very, very good beginner-friendly project. It is definitively easy in terms of difficulty, but I did mess up several times while doing this and had to rip back. And that just is, you know, comes with the territory of being a new knitter. This is how it turned out. I knitted the size small. I think I could have gone down a size, but I did like the sort of loose, relaxed fit in the sample photos, the way that she was modeling it. And I used up 2 skeins of yarn. I probably should have gotten a 3rd skein, but I just did not want to do that. I was done with the project. So it is an awkward length. It is not quite cropped and it's not quite full length. So the proportions is a little weird with this one. So if you are planning to do this project with this yarn, I would recommend going for three skeins instead of 2. I made a couple of modifications. The main one is the bind off. So the pattern calls for a ribbed bind off. So, you know, all the purls you purl, all the knits you knit, all the knits you knit. But one of the things that I loved so much about the design of this top is the sort of rolled stockinette arm and neck edging. And this is all done contiguously, so you know, you don't pick up any stitches. You kind of create this edging while you knit across, and I just thought that was so clever, and the end result was so beautiful. And I felt that the, you know, just the regular bind off looked a bit abrupt and also disjointed from the other edges of this piece. So I thought, well, you know, usually people don't love a rolled stockinette. You know, they find that it looks unfinished, but to me it matches the rest of the top so well. So I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go for the stockinette edge. And so you can kind of see I stopped knitting the rib about 1/2 inch down. If I had more yarn, I think I would have done a couple more rows even, and then I just bound off. So this is kind of the way that it looks. And you can, I think it would look really even better if there was a bit of that stockinette showing. So you could block it or yeah, knit just a little tiny bit more in order for that to show. But I'm really happy with that modification. I think it looks super nice and it flows, you know, it sits really lovely over your pants and things like that. What else is there to say about this? I'm super proud of this. I've been wearing it a ton. The yarn choice maybe wasn't the most ideal. I know I love cotton. Most of my t-shirts and the items that I wear are made out of cotton. So I thought, you know, it was a no-brainer to get cotton yarn. It wasn't until after I started these projects that I started, you know, reading some other knitters and opinions on why they don't love knitting with cotton, or at least, you know, 100% cotton. And now I understand those things. It is heavy. It can be, you know, just a little bit stiff. This cotton yarn in particular was like so smooth and supple. Even in the skein, I could tell, like, I just loved the way that it felt. But yeah, in comparison to something like silk or linen, it still is, like, you know, stiffer. And then, yeah, I think mainly just it being a bit heavier and a little bit thicker makes it not so easy to style. So I do plan on making another one of these tops, just judging by how much I wear it. I really love this style, but maybe I'll choose a different fiber next time. Overall though, for my very first project, I'm so happy with it. We're gonna go in order of cast on. So this was the second project that I casted onto my needles. And this is my first ever shawl. So this is the Celtic Myths shawl. Just look at it. Oh my God, I'm obsessed. I'm so happy with this piece. This is a free pattern on Ravelry, and there's actually two versions of it. This was the original version that was written for sport weight yarn, and then the designer released a second version that is for fingering weight yarn, with some kind of corrections. There's at this little corner where you cast on, this version tends to do this, like it has a bump. So the second version sort of corrects that a bit. But the yarn that I chose for this is also from Purl Soho, from the same exact order. All of my, you know, first projects are from that order. And these are the Wigeon, which is a 100% merino Falkland wool. And there are two colors here. This one here is Gulf Green, and this one here is Green Willow. These yarns, this is the first time working with a nice wool, because like I said previously, the first projects that I worked on, I used like super cheap dollar store yarn. That was still wool, but it was of very low quality. And I loved, you know, learning how to knit with that. But this is just a game changer, man. Like, feeling this material on the needles and then the final result of it too, I'm hooked. And it is not good for my wallet because I really have fallen in love and know that I can never go back to, like, you know, not saying that I will only buy the best, the nicest, most premium yarns ever, but I don't think I could go back to knitting with like super cheap yarns anymore. Anyways, let's actually talk about the project. This is a shawl with a attached border. So you first knit this body using increases along each side, and then there's also a little eyelet border as you knit the body. And then once you reach your desired width or circumference or whatever you want to call this, then you cast on some extra stitches horizontally like this, and then you begin the cable repeat while attaching it to the main body. So this was my very first experience with knitting cables, and I must say I was extremely intimidated by it. I'd only ever worked with kind of purls and knits and, you know, plain either stockinette or ribbing. And you know, when you look at a cable and you have no idea how these things are created, it looks like magic. Like you really think it's so complex to make something like this. But I'm so glad that I chose this as my first cable, because first of all, this specific Celtic knot cable is just so beautiful and addicting. Like, the reason why I pushed through my trepidations to knit this is just because I'm mesmerized by the final result, and I was like, I have to try. I want to learn how to do this. And it was actually much simpler than I had thought. So, you know, you learn a couple of new techniques, and then it's just a pattern that repeats. I would say the first time I did one of these repeats, it's like a 16-row repeat. You know, I was reading every single cell. I was looking at each cell and, you know, knitting to that cell. So it took me forever. By the time I got to around here, I didn't have to like read each cell anymore. I knew what each line was going to be, but I still had to reference back and forth to figure out what comes next. And then by the time I probably reached like the middle, I could almost, you know, do it without referencing the chart, maybe just once or twice if I got lost. And it became extremely therapeutic and just so beautiful to knit on. And there's just, it's incredibly gratifying to watch this chain grow across the shawl. And I also love how drapey this is. I think this was the perfect gauge for a project like this. And I knitted it a little bit bigger than what the pattern is written. They do give you instructions on how to adjust the size of this shawl, but it wraps around like this, and I cannot wait to bring it back out in the fall time. I finished it just when the weather started to get hot. I think I literally finished it on the summer solstice. So I took some pictures in it, and then I just folded it and put it away because I live in San Diego, and there just ain't no way I am putting wool around me. Last but not least, after doing some cabling and feeling like pretty confident and very, you know, good about myself, I decided to cast on this tank top. This is the Ilana Camisole. I forgot the designer's name, but I will put it down below. This was one of the very first patterns that I came across on Ravelry that made me gasp. Like I genuinely was just like, that is so stunning, and I can't wait to one day cast it on. And in my little beginner head, I thought it would be years before I would be able to do something like this. But really, once I learned, you know, how to construct a tank top, and once I learned how to do some cabling, I thought, well, this is basically just a tank top with some cabling. And I was like, you know what, it looks really complicated, but it seems, you know, from the reviews and stuff, it seems like it's not that hard. And also I think it's beautiful and I want to wear it, so let's just go for it. And I had this yarn already in stash, again from the exact same order, so all the yarns came from you know, the same shopping day. And this is again the pure cotton from Purl Soho, and this one is in the color okay, I don't remember. I will put it on the screen somewhere. But another beautiful muted warm color. This is like a soft dusty rose pink. So this one is knitted top down as well. I forgot to mention that Ilana is also top down. You work on each strap, you do your increases, then you join in the round, and then there is some bust shaping that's just done with some decreases, and there is a chart for this. This pattern, for how intricate it looks, this pattern was only like 2.5 pages long. It was so easy to follow. Maybe the easiest pattern that I've followed to this point. I don't know why I was so intimidated by it. This was fantastic. The hardest part for me was really getting used to this stitch pattern. So it is this really cool, like cabled rib. So it you know, it behaves like a rib, but each rib has these lovely twisted cables. But doing the gauge swatch really helped me to get the stitches down, and then once you start working on it, again, it becomes very intuitive. It's a pattern, right? And your brain, human brains are wired to pick up on patterns. Not to say it's effortless, but it is something that you're capable of and you should be able to do. So anyway, I'm just trying to encourage you to knit this pattern if you think it's beautiful, but you feel that you're not experienced enough yet. You got this, girl, okay? There's a V-neck in the front and the back. Then the cables also run along the borders, which I think is a very beautiful and elegant design feature. This is beautiful. It is very, very cropped. I do have half a ball, about 50 grams left of this yarn. So in the future, if I did want to extend it down, I could, but I think the cropped length is just so lovely, and a lot of the samples that I saw online were extremely cropped, and it just felt very summery and perfect. So that's what I decided to do with this one as well. The thing about rib also is just the way that it kind of forms to your body as you're wearing it. You know, it's just very flattering, and then this detail is truly the, you know, that's the winner for me. And it kind of comes around your bust and is so flattering. So 10 out of 10. I also really love this project. I think I also could have sized down on this. I'm sort of in between sizes on a lot of patterns, and I just want to go for the one that's going to be the most forgiving. So yeah, this is not as form-fitting as it could be on me, but I'm very happy with it. So I can't wait to wear this with like little jean shorts, like light linen pants and skirts, and there's something so lovely and like carefree about this type of style, and I'm just proud of myself that I pushed myself and I completed it, and it really wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So there you go. All right, let's move on to some whips. I'm gonna show you one languishing whip, and then I'm gonna show you 2 active whips, and then we'll see where that takes us. Okay? Okay. All right, for the languishing whip, this one I'm kind of sad about, but you know, it's a journey, so it's fine, just have some perspective. I am knitting the Umbria Summer Top by Cookie the Knitter, and I was, again, this was a yarn inspired project. So I went to my local yarn shop here in San Diego, and I found these beautiful linen yarns in their sale section. It's a blend of, I think, linen, cotton, viscose, and a tiny bit of polyester. And it is a sort of a tweedy type of yarn. I feel like it's just not getting picked up super well by the camera, which is disappointing, but they just have this lovely sheen. And I also really enjoyed these two colors together. Again, soft autumn color palette. And so I picked up 3 balls of this, 2 of this rich brown shade, and then 2 of this light pink. And I had the idea of knitting the Umbria summer top, but with stripes. So I wanted to make it like a stripey type of project. And I was so excited about this. So the Umbria summer top is a top-down raglan short sleeve sweater, and it is in this all over broken rib pattern. And I thought it looks, you know, simple enough. And broken rib is really not that difficult to learn if you know how to do basic rib and knits and purls. And so I thought, okay, like, let's make something fun with this. I feel that this combo is also just like very Italian. Umbria is like a region in Italy, or Umbria, I don't know. And yeah, there's something like a little bit pastoral about this knitting pattern. And anyways, it just like created this whole atmosphere in my head, and I was like, you know, even the colors help to create that mood, and I just wanted to cast it on, so I did. And again, it's also like, you know, I was very intrigued with working with linen yarn, especially after creating both of those initial pieces with 100% pure cotton. And I knew that I enjoyed my linen pieces that are in my wardrobe already. But a couple things have gone wrong, and I'm not skilled yet enough to move forward. It's nothing that is disastrous, so I don't want to frog it because it's totally fine so far. I just don't know how to move forward from here, because I've basically made a modification to this pattern that I did not intend to. And if I were a more experienced knitter, I would then know how to adjust the rest of the pattern to like match up with the modification I made. And basically the modification is a few extra short rows that were not included in the pattern. And this was just, you know, because I didn't read it correctly. And now it's also a translated pattern. I think the original designer is Korean. And so the English pattern was just very different from the other patterns that I've read so far. And some of the ways that it was worded was just confusing to me. Like, I had a very difficult time interpreting it. And then the other issue is probably just that it is just slightly a little bit above my skill level. But I managed to, you know, cast on the entire neck collar, the entire collar. It was a first time doing the Italian stretchy bind or cast on, and that was also a little bit fiddly, but I absolutely love how it looks. I also just enjoy this little contrast that I did with the colors. And then I split for the raglan, started knitting in pattern, and then it came time to do short rows. I learned how to do German short rows. But I think I was just juggling a lot of different things in my head with the increases with the raglan, and then, you know, maintaining the broken rib, because the way she writes the pattern, she doesn't give you like a chart or doesn't give you each stitch. She will just say continue in pattern. So you kind of have to figure out yourself what that means. And then doing the German short rows, I did 4 extra rows of short rows than what is written. I also somehow ended up with 2 extra stitches on the right side than the left side, even though I double counted everything. So, I mean, that's not a huge problem, but the short rows definitely has thrown me off the pattern. And the next part of this pattern does include charts that I'm very confused by, and so we're putting this on hold until I have more experience or I have the wherewithal to come back to it and try to sort it all out. But overall, I am very excited about this, the fabric and everything. I can just imagine the finished object will be so beautiful and so wearable, and I can't wait to do my first button band as well, and sew on some buttons. And so I think this is going to be a project that I complete for next summer. And so I have it locked up and I have it safely tucked away in my stash in this little bag here. Next, let's look at our active whips. So again, in order of cast on, my first whip is this right here, and this is the Claudia dress. Let me talk about the yarn really quickly. I discovered this little knitting shop, this little yarn store, while I was on a work trip in Monterey, and it's called Monarch Knitting, and it's in Pacific Grove, which is sort of like central coast of California, I would say. And this place was an absolute candy shop for a knitter. It is huge. There's tons of shelves just packed with yarn. I made a miscalculation and I only had about an hour to spend in this shop before I had to go and catch my flight. So I walked into this place, gasped, and then I was like, I'm just not gonna be able to explore this whole shop. But I'm gonna be back in Monterey this September, and I am 100% going back to the store just to be able to be in that space again. Anyways, in the sales section, I was able to find some really cool yarns. And up until this point, obviously I have not worked with any indie yarns. They're just very expensive. And I know I did splurge a little bit on some of my yarns, but I've walked into plenty of stores and not bought these like hand-dyed yarns before. But this place had an amazing sale section that had everything was 50% off. That's really, really good discount. And I found 4 skeins, so a dress quantity of this yarn right here. And this is from the Plucky knitter. It is their Primo Sport base. I don't know if I have to do this or if you can even read that. It's the Primo Sport base, and this is 105 grams, and it's 75% superwash merino, 20% cashmere, and 5% nylon. For something with cashmere in it, I just thought it was a steal. So each skein originally was $35, which is way out of my price range. But I managed to pick up 4 of this colorway. So the total price of the project is about $80. And that's not cheap by any standards, but it is definitely a great price for a full, beautiful knitted garment in a fabric as lovely as this one. They had 2 colorways, both with 4 skeins available, and I chose this sort of golden green brown. I think it is super beautiful. One of the samples that the designer created is in a very similar colorway, and I fell in love with that too. I do recognize that this is it is very Shrek. It is very Shrek core. I don't mind it at all. And just feels so beautiful. This is my first time ever working with superwash wool. I know lots of knitters do not enjoy superwash because of the qualities that it has. And I will say it is extremely different from knitting this shawl with the merino wool. So that was a learning curve for me as well. One, I did have to size down on the needle. This is the correct gauge, and I was able to hit gauge in my swatch. but when it came to knitting in the round, I just noticed it started to feel quite loose, and so I went down from a 4mm needle to a 3.75mm needle. The other thing too is it is quite like slippery, right? Like that's a very smooth fabric, which is perfect for something like this because it is meant to be worn, you know, it's a sleeveless dress with a deep plunge. So it's not meant to be a warm garment at all. And that was one of the reasons why I chose this yarn. It still has like the bounce and the memory of wool, but it's not going to suffocate me and make me feel so hot. So I was like, this is exactly the type of yarn that I wanted to make this dress out of. I was so excited. And then I cast it on, I started working on it. You can see here, I finished the entire top portion, and then all I have to do now is knit the skirt, which is just knitting in the round with some increases. This pattern is made to measure, so there's a spreadsheet that you enter your measurements into, and then it will generate the number of stitches, how often you do your increases and decreases, etc., etc. I love those types of patterns. I think that's so clever, and it's really just based on your gauge and your swatch, right? Like it just is some mathematical formulas that will give you the proper instructions. I did make a few modifications to this, mainly in the back panel. I decided to do some more decreases at a more rapid rate along the underarms, just because I didn't want too much fabric sort of along this part of my body and the shoulder blade. It didn't make too big of a difference, I don't think, but I really like how that turned out as well. I think it's just a lot more flattering. And then similar to the shoulders here, I started my split. I split for shoulders a little bit earlier than what the pattern recommends, and that also gave me a little bit better of a fit. So with this pattern, you actually cast on from the middle. So you cast on however many stitches will fit your waist, and then you begin to knit in the round. Then you decide when to split for the plunge. I only knit for a little bit. I wanted a nice deep plunge because I have a sternum tattoo right here, and I wanted this dress to show off the tattoo. Then you do knitting and knitting flat while doing increases for the bust, and then you split again, and you knit the front panel here, then you knit the back panel, and then you knit the front left panel, and then you've completed the top portion. At this point, I thought it might be a good idea to wash and block the garment. Just because obviously I've not worked with this yarn before, and I just want to make sure that the fit looks good. So that's what I did. And I had a bit of a scare with this because when it is wet, the superwash wool loses all of its structure. It becomes like extremely stretched out, and I really thought I messed up supremely. I set it down to dry flats, and then I tried it on when it was maybe like 80% dry because I was just so nervous about it, and it was just hanging super weird. It looked saggy, it looked too big, and I was just losing all of my morale. And then Finally I was like, you know, I'm just gonna let it be. I'll restart this project again. I'll frog it. I even put in, you know, I adjusted the numbers in the spreadsheet to get new stitch counts and everything. And then in the morning when it was completely dry, I tried it on and I was like, huh, it's completely fine. I panicked for no reason. So that's just something, if you've never worked with superwash merino and you're a beginner like me, just don't panic, you know, wait for it to dry completely and see how it works out. I have a little earring here as the closure for now, but I actually love the way that it looks. This is just like a cheapy little hoop earring from a set that I found at Marshall's, and I just have not been wearing them in my ears. So I actually have been using these as stitch markers up until this point, and then I thought, well, it works great as a little fastener. Adds just a little bit of bling. That's just so cute, isn't it? It fits so lovely, and it shows off, it's the exact, you know, placement of my dragonfly tattoo. I'm super pleased with this, and I can't wait to knit up the skirt. In addition to this being a made to measure pattern, it also gives you several options for the skirt, so you can decide whether you want to do an A-line skirt or just, you know, more of a form-fitting skirt. You can decide whether to do a slit. You can decide whether to do mini or a midi length. So I have not decided yet. I think I will just complete all the increases until it fits my hips, and then I will block and try on again and then figure out what I want to do with the skirt. I have 2.5 skeins left of this yarn. So I think I will have enough yarn to do any length of the dress that I prefer, which is really, really nice. That's quite the luxury. So that is the Claudia dress. I can't wait to finish it and wear it. I think it'll be so cute on the beach or on vacation when you go to dinner and you just feel, yeah, it's so nice. And then last but not least, I am test knitting a very special project. So this is my very, very first test knit. It's for a designer who's based in Canada. Her name is Charlotte, or Lottie Knitwear, and she's released a couple of really beautiful patterns already. I started following her on Instagram. I really want to try knitting her Pluma vest. I think that one is a gorgeous design too. But she put out a test call for her newest vest design, which is the Mika vest. This is also a top-down. I felt fairly confident that I'd be able to do this just because I've completed other similar constructions before. It's made out of a fluffy yarn. I think her recommendation is the Drops Alpaca Silk, or Drops Brushed Alpaca, actually. She gives a lot of alternate yarn recommendations, but as long as it's one of these sort of like fluffy mohair type of yarns, and it creates a very lightweight fabric. And then there's this chunky ribbed detail along the scoop neck and then the armholes. I was super excited to see this project because I have always wanted to knit a vest, but many vests just aren't the fit that would be flattering on me. A lot of them are very high-necked, and for me, that just does not work for my proportions. It's also a bit uncomfortable. So a lot of like the vests that are available on Ravelry just didn't seem right for myself, even though they're beautiful projects. So when I saw this one, I was like, oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to try it out. And then I realized that she wanted testers, and I was like, maybe I should go for it, because I've heard that when you test, you know, you have access to a whole group of testers, you can ask questions, you have access to the designer. These are all things that I really wanted. Like I feel like joining starting a new craft also comes with the possibility of gaining a new community, and I'm fairly shy and reserved, and I was like, this is just a perfect opportunity for me to dip my toe into that. So she very graciously accepted me, even though I had very few posts on Instagram and I was a beginner. And she's just been a very sweet designer to work with. So yeah, but ultimately this is just a garment that I really, really love. And it's coming out beautifully. It's a very simple design, but I think the details and the proportion is what really make it. The yarn I'm using is the Bling Bling yarn from We Are Knitters. This was something that I had in my stash. I think I ordered this yarn without an idea for a pattern, or actually, no, I did have an idea for a pattern. This was a yarn that I chose. I really wanted to create like a lovely feminine long sleeve top, either like a wrap top or, you know, one with full sleeves and some lace. But when I think about my personal style, it just does not fit in with the clothes that I wear day to day in reality. And I think just having the combination of like a soft pink fluffy yarn, this one specifically has some lurex in it, so it also is shiny, you know, very subtle, but there is some shine in here. So it's just an extremely feminine looking yarn. And if I paired it with an extremely feminine pattern, it just would feel completely out of place. It wouldn't feel like myself, and I don't think I would wear it. So I had lots of this yarn and I didn't have a project to do with it until I came across this test knit, and I thought this is actually a great yarn to use. Not only is it the right gauge, I think it creates just the right amount of juxtaposition between, you know, very feminine, very girly yarn and very simple boxy design. So I can definitely see myself wearing this and styling it many, many, many different ways. I have completed the yoke, and then I've done the neck ribbing and one of the arms, and I'm gonna do the second one. So as you can tell, you first knit the stockinette body, and then you pick up stitches to do this 2x2 rib. Then you fold it down and you sew it. I've been really enjoying this process so far. I might get a little bored once I get to the stockinette, but you know, we'll get there when we get there, and I'll cast on new projects to work on once I reach that point with this one. All right, that is all the whips and finished objects. I feel like I've been talking forever. I'm not a chatty person naturally in my day-to-day life, not even with friends. So I feel like my voice is quite tired and my brain is quite tired. Okay, so this is quite the time jump from the previous clips that I filmed. We're actually several months into the future. As you can see, my hair has gotten longer, and I've finished the Mika vest and the dress that I was working on in that video. That was my very first attempt at filming a podcast, and I got very tired towards the end of it, and then I got distracted because I realized that my cat was still outside and the sun was going down and I needed to bring him back in. So I sort of just abandoned that whole thing. And so I wanted to finally just finish off that podcast video, give you the updates on the whips that I had been working on. And then today I'm filming a new podcast. And so there's tons of other projects that I'm super excited to share. So after you finish watching this video, you're welcome to check out that one too. But without further ado, let's take a moment for the completed objects. So the first one was the dress, the green dress. And I have completed this dress, and I've worn it a few times before the weather got too cold. So I completed this in, I think it was probably August or September, and I was super pleased with this garment. Obviously, it feels like a huge accomplishment to finish a whole dress, and it is, you know, impressive just from that fact alone, but also everything about it is just perfect for me. It's super soft, super smooth, and the fit is lovely. I thought I had enough yarn to create like a midi length or at least like a knee length dress, but it turns out that I only had enough for sort of like a mini above the knee. And the designer gives you several options for the bottom of the dress. I need to drape it over myself. So there's a straight version, you can do a slit, and you can also do an A-line. So I did a combination of A-line and slit. I did the increases up to here, where I started the slit on the side of the dress. I did attempt to make a slit in the front of the dress, but given the length that this was going to end up, I thought that it looked very awkward. If the dress was going to be much longer, then yes, I would like the slit to be in the front. I think that's very sexy. But with this length, it just looked odd. So I'd opted to make the slit on the actual side seam here. So it still allows for movement of the legs when you're walking, but you have full coverage on the front. And it's finished off with an Italian bind off. This was my first time trying the Italian bind off. It was definitely tricky. It took me a second to figure out, but I do enjoy the way that it looks, and I will definitely be using that technique in future garments. So all in all, this dress was a win for me. Fun story as well. I wore this dress to my local yarn crawl. We have a few yarn shops here where I live, and I ran into the designer of this dress. So that was really fun. I'll add some pictures in here. It was super serendipitous because somebody just complimented me on the dress I was wearing and they asked who designed it. And as I was explaining who designed this, she turns around and she goes, "That's my dress," or "That's my design." And I was like, no way, what a crazy small world. So it also just made me feel like I was part of the community finally. I've, you know, been working on this mostly privately at home. And so it was just so cool to make that connection with another person in the knitting community. So thank you so much for being so sweet to me when we met. And check out, she has other designs too. I thought this was such a well-written pattern, gave so many options. And again, the result is a stunning, stunning dress. So I'll show a cutaway of me wearing it so you can see more details of this dress. So then the next update is for the Mika vest, which obviously I completed a while back because it was for a deadline for the test knit. But this is how it turned out. Today I have it layered over a little mock neck, but there's so many fun ways to wear this. The armhole, I think, is just the perfect depth for even if you're wearing kind of like a looser shirt, like a button-up shirt even underneath it. It's just such a fun layering piece. And I just think that the folded rib detail around the top and around the arms add the perfect amount of detail to an otherwise a very basic top. And again, I do enjoy this sort of deep scoop neck. I do think that I made the scoop neck a little bit too deep for myself and my bodily proportions, especially since I don't have much of a chest. It looks a little low, but I still think it is beautiful. And I've styled it a few different ways throughout the fall and the winter time. And so I'm really excited to also style it in the spring. I have a few outfit ideas, so maybe I'll try on some of those outfits for you all to check out how this really is such a versatile piece. And I also would highly recommend this pattern. It was very easy to follow along. This is a great beginner pattern, and the yarn was also perfect. So thank you so much for watching this episode of the podcast. It's a little funny and stitched together, but my first attempt of anything will be a little bit imperfect. So if you enjoyed it, thank you so much for being here. And like I said, I am filming the next episode of the podcast. So if you want to see more projects that I'm working on, then please go to that next episode. But thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you're working on a project, I hope you made some good progress. And until next time, happy knitting. Bye.